For 6 hours, parts of Ukraine simply stopped talking to the world. No air raid alerts refreshing on phones. No drone operators relaying coordinates back to command. No frontline units checking in. Just silence, sitting on top of a country that has spent 4 years proving it can survive almost anything Russia throws at it. And when the silence finally broke, when the power flickered back on and the networks reconnected, what it revealed wasn't just another night of bombing. It revealed something far more dangerous. It revealed exactly how fragile Ukraine's entire high-tech war machine really is, and exactly where Vladimir Putin has been aiming this entire time. To understand what just happened, you have to go back to the moment Russia stopped trying to win this war on the battlefield and started trying to win it in the dark. In one of the most devastating combined strikes of the entire war, Russia launched over 600 drones and dozens of missiles at Ukraine in a single night, an assault so large that Ukrainian officials called it the largest combined strike since the previous December and one of the 3 largest of the entire conflict. 635 drones, 38 missiles. Ukraine's air defense shot down the overwhelming majority of them, but overwhelming majority is not everything, and when you're launching an attack of this scale, you don't need everything to get through. You only need to hit the right things. And Russia hit the right things. Impacts were confirmed across 21 separate locations. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia was, in his words, primarily targeting the energy sector, civilian infrastructure, and literally all aspects of daily life. Emergency power cuts swept across entire regions. Kyiv went dark. So did Khmelnytsky. So did Zhytomyr, where a 4-year-old child was among the dead. This was not a random act of destruction. This was surgical. And that's exactly what should terrify you, because a random act of destruction tells you Russia is angry. A surgical one tells you Russia has a plan. Ukraine's own deputy energy minister, Mykola Kolesnik, put it in the starkest terms possible. He said the enemy's plan is social instability through total blackout. And then he said something even more chilling. He said this is not a hybrid threat. This is a military threat. Russian forces, he explained, were being extremely precise, targeting high-voltage substations and power lines specifically designed to sever the electrical connections between entire regions of the country, not just knocking out power to homes, severing the nervous system of the nation itself, region by region, substation by substation. Now here is where the story stops being about power outages and starts being about something far more strategic, something most people watching the news that night had no idea they were actually witnessing. Because Ukraine is not fighting this war the way wars have historically been fought. Ukraine is fighting the first truly software-defined war in human history. This is a nation producing drones at an absolutely staggering industrial scale, well over 3 million units a year across air, ground, and maritime categories, with a projected output pushing towards 7 million in 2026 alone. Every single one of those drones, every autonomous system, every piece of Ukraine's battlefield intelligence network depends on one thing above all else: connectivity. Bandwidth. The invisible digital nervous system that tells a drone where to fly, tells a commander what the battlefield looks like in real time, and tells an air defense battery where the next incoming missile actually is. And that digital nervous system runs, overwhelmingly, through the cloud. This is the part Russia understands, and most of the watching world does not. Ukraine's entire warfighting architecture has become cloud-centric, meaning the actual computation, the actual brains behind the drone swarms and the targeting systems, doesn't live on the front line. It lives in data centers, connected back to the battlefield through networks that can be jammed, intercepted, or physically severed. According to a detailed analysis published by the Atlantic Council, if that link goes down, the current architecture of Ukrainian warfighting would collapse within days, not weeks. Days. This has already happened once, and it should have been a warning to the entire world. In July of 2025, a global Starlink outage, Elon Musk's satellite internet system that Ukraine's military has come to depend on for frontline communications, directly struck Ukraine's military communications network. Not a cyber attack, a global technical outage on a system controlled by a private American company thousands of miles away, and it still managed to disrupt Ukrainian military operations. Now ask yourself the question that should be keeping Ukrainian generals up at night. If a random technical glitch can do that kind of damage, what happens when Russia deliberately, systematically, and repeatedly targets the exact same vulnerability, not once, but as a sustained military strategy? That is precisely what appears to be unfolding. This is the trap Russia has built, and it is a genuinely brutal piece of strategic engineering. Russian strikes decimate Ukraine's domestic power generation. That reduces the country's capacity to run its own compute infrastructure, its own data centers, its own domestic processing power. Reduced domestic capacity forces Ukraine to lean even harder on external cloud services, accessed through networks and satellite links that Russia can jam, disrupt, or interdict. And every time that dependency deepens, Russia's leverage over Ukraine's entire war effort grows a little stronger. It's not a single blow. It's a slow strangulation, one substation at a time, one blackout at a time, each one pushing Ukraine further into a digital dependency that Moscow can reach out and choke whenever it chooses. And the energy picture underneath all of this is even worse than it first appears. Millions of Ukrainians are already facing rolling blackouts lasting up to 4 full days. Russian strikes have decimated the thermal power plants that Ukraine relies on for critical load balancing, the flexible backup capacity that keeps the grid stable when demand spikes or supply drops. Meanwhile, Ukraine's largest nuclear facility, the massive Zaporizhzhia plant, remains under Russian occupation, completely offline, unable to contribute a single watt to the national grid it was built to power. That absence puts enormous, unrelenting strain on the country's remaining active nuclear plants, like the South Ukraine nuclear power plant, which now has to carry a baseload burden it was never designed to shoulder alone. Do you see the full shape of what's happening now? This isn't just an energy crisis. It's the deliberate unraveling of the physical foundation that Ukraine's entire digital war machine sits on top of. You cannot run a drone war without electricity. You cannot process real-time targeting data without power flowing to a data center. You cannot keep a satellite uplink alive on a laptop with a dead battery and a blacked-out command post. Every missile aimed at a substation is also, indirectly, a missile aimed at the software, the drones, and the artificial intelligence systems that have kept Ukraine alive against a much larger adversary for 4 brutal years. This is why that 6-hour silence mattered so much more than a typical blackout. It wasn't just families sitting in the dark lighting candles, although that tragedy is real and it's happening across the country every single week. It was a live demonstration, playing out in real time, of exactly how close Russia's blackout strategy is to actually working. For 6 hours, coordination slowed, communication frayed, and when the lights and the networks finally came back online, Ukrainian commanders got a very clear, very unwelcome preview of what a truly successful blackout campaign against their cloud-dependent war machine would actually look like. So what is Ukraine doing about it? Because, to their credit, this vulnerability has not gone unnoticed by the people actually fighting this war. Defense analysts and technologists working directly with Ukraine's military have laid out exactly what needs to happen next, and it amounts to nothing less than a complete restructuring of how and where Ukraine's digital war effort actually lives. The first piece is hardened, bunker-grade domestic data centers, built deep in western Ukraine, far enough from the front lines to survive sustained bombardment, but still close enough to support the operational tempo that a fast-moving drone war demands. These facilities need redundant power drawn from multiple independent sources, so that no single missile strike on a single substation can take them offline. They need physical hardening capable of surviving direct hits. And they need serious cyber defenses to block the Russian intrusion attempts that inevitably follow any high-value target. The second piece is forward-deployed compute nodes, smaller processing hubs, positioned at the operational and tactical level, close to the actual fighting. These don't need to match the raw power of a massive cloud data center. They just need enough capacity to keep autonomous drone operations running even when the connection back to higher command degrades or disappears entirely, with enough built-in redundancy that losing any single node doesn't bring down the whole network. And the third piece, arguably the most urgent, is redundant, non-radio-based communications. A way to keep drones, command posts, and frontline units connected to each other that doesn't rely entirely on a single satellite constellation owned by a company on the other side of the planet, and doesn't rely entirely on a power grid that Russian missiles have proven, night after night, they can reach. There's a mirror image to this story that most people watching Ukraine's fight have never even considered, and it makes the entire situation feel less like one side's advantage and more like a shared vulnerability neither military can fully escape. Russia's own forces are reportedly facing a growing communications crisis of their own, driven by disruptions to Telegram and Starlink usage patterns that are leaving Russian troops increasingly cut off and exposing serious strain deep inside Russia's own military command structure. This is not a war being fought only with artillery and infantry anymore. It's a war being fought over who can keep their own digital nervous system alive the longest while trying to sever their opponents. Which brings us to the question that should genuinely unsettle you. If a 6-hour blackout was enough to expose this vulnerability this clearly, what happens the next time Russia doesn't stop at 6 hours? What happens if the next combined strike is bigger than 600 drones? What happens if the next wave of missiles doesn't just hit 21 locations, but specifically, deliberately targets the exact substations feeding Ukraine's remaining hardened data centers, the ones meant to be the backup plan, the fail-safe, the last line of digital defense? Because that is the terrifying secret those 6 hours of silence actually revealed. Not that Ukraine's military is weak. It has proven the opposite, again and again for 4 years, against every prediction the world made about how quickly it would collapse. The secret is quieter and more unsettling than that. It's that the very technology making Ukraine's resistance so effective, the drone swarms, the real-time targeting, the AI-assisted battlefield awareness, that has allowed a smaller nation to fight a much larger one to a standstill is built on a foundation that can be cracked by something as simple as unglamorous and as devastatingly effective as a missile aimed at a power substation. Zelensky said it himself, and it applies just as much to this new phase of the war as it did to the strike that inspired it. The attack sends an extremely clear signal about Russia's priorities. Putin is no longer trying to win this war only with tanks and trenches. He is trying to win it by finding the invisible wires holding Ukraine's entire digital war machine together and cutting them, one substation, one blackout, one silent hour at a time. The lights came back on, the networks reconnected, Ukraine kept fighting the way it always has. But for 6 hours, the world got a glimpse of exactly where this war is really headed next, and exactly how much of Ukraine's future now depends not on the size of its army, but on whether its power grid, its data centers, and its satellite links can survive what Moscow sends at them next. Thank you for watching. If you want us to keep tracking what's really happening behind the front lines of this war, make sure to like this video and leave a comment below.